Hi, my name is Ken.
And my name is Jason.
And today we're playing
Twilight Imperium.
So, Twilight Imperium has an extensive history, all of which Jason has outlined here. So, while he goes over decades and eons of space warfare and such, I'm gonna just go play some Plants vs. Zombies.
Well, I don't know about decades and eons, but...
Trions.
Twilight Imperium was originally published in 1997, well, the first edition was. It was actually the first game that was designed and published by Christian T. Peterson, who is the founder and CEO of Fantasy Flight Games. So this was really their first game and what got them started. And they've kind of gone through a repetitive cycle on this game. So what will usually happen is, well, the first edition came out in 1997. They published, I think, 2 or 3 expansions for it. Then they released the second edition, which kind of, removed some of the things that weren't working and included some of the things with the expansions. And it was pretty much the same thing. They released a couple expansions for that. They redid it into the third edition. And the third edition is what we're talking about today. There actually are already 2 expansions for this one. So sooner or later we'll probably see the 4th edition. But probably not soon. Regardless, it is a really massive game, as you will see.
Twilight Imperium is a game where players take control of various very interesting and very creative, I would have to say, space races. They're all vying for control of the same shattered empire.
So first of all, let's go over the components for Twilight Imperium. So these are the hex tiles that make up the board, and they consist of standard systems, which have no border, the special systems, which have a red border, and the home systems for each of the alien races that have the yellow border. So these are the various plastic bits that players will have access to, and they consist of the space docks, ground force units, planetary defense systems, or PDS, fighters, carriers, cruisers, destroyers, dreadnoughts, and war suns. These are the various card types that come with the game. So we have planet cards, political cards, public objective cards, which come in Stage 1 and Stage 2, secret objective cards, action cards, and technology cards. These are most of the cardboard counters that come with the game. So we have the speaker token, bonus tokens, trade good tokens, ground force unit tokens, fighter tokens, and these are the tokens for the 2 mini expansions that come with the game, the leaders and distant suns. Here's some more bits for the game. So we have all of the strategy cards. This is the victory point tracker, and it has 2 sides, one side for the normal game and one side for the long game. And we're playing the long game today, right, Ken?
Oh yeah, definitely. We've got all the time in the world.
Obviously, yes.
Sure.
And of course, these are the dice. And finally, these are the race-specific components. So we have the race sheet, which gives all the details of that race. These are the 2 trade contract cards. We have control markers, and the command tokens, which are double-sided.
So there are different rules for a different number of players. We're going to be showing the 6-player rules, but noting differences where necessary. In our game, we're actually playing with 3 players. So we're going to be showing you the differences between the 6-player and the 3-player game, essentially. First, you're going to want to get all the home tiles out from all the other tiles, and you're going to want to shuffle them all together. This is going to determine your starting races. The rest of the home tiles are then returned to the box. Alright, then everybody reveals who they're going to be playing. So I appear to have the Barony of Letnev and the Nalu Collective.
And I am playing the Universities of Jolnar.
So first you want to retrieve the race sheet and the appropriate tokens that go with it. Next you pick a color, and that's going to be associated with you for the rest of the game. Jason, what do you want to pick?
I think I'll go with purple to kind of go with the color scheme for the universities.
Yeah, fair enough. I'm going to go with my default of green. And I guess blue. Blue's a good color. I don't really have the option of brown and brown, so...
It's more of brown and beige, but, you know, actually gray and beige.
Anyway, so the barony is going to get blue, and the collective is going to get green. Next, take the political and action cards and shuffle them all up into their separate decks. So the action cards will make one deck, the political cards will all make another deck. And then they are going to get put into their own little space on the board. Now you can place the ground force and fighter tokens and the trade good tokens all in a similar area along with your action and political cards. For the sake of simplicity, I'm just going to leave them in this bag. Each player places the planet cards from his home system in front of him. So I retrieve Drua and Malok for the Nalu collective. They really like their vowels. And I retrieve Arc Prime and Rentera for the Barony Letnev.
And, of course, I have Joel and Nar.
The remaining planet cards are placed in the general player area. Place the strategy cards face up in the player area. First, take the secret objective cards, shuffle them all up, hand one to each player, and return the rest to the box. Removing the Game Over card from the Phase 2 public objective cards, shuffle them up, draw 3 of the public objective cards, and shuffle these 4 cards together. The rest of the Phase 2 objectives go back to the box. Shuffle the Phase 1 objective cards, draw 6, and put them on top of the Phase 2 public objective cards. Return the rest of the box. Place the victory point tracker into the common area. Place one of each player's control markers on the 0 location. Now for the fun part. We get to actually create the board. First, place Mecharex in the center of the board. Now, we're probably going to be adjusting a lot of this as we go along, so bear in mind some pretty random changes. Randomly determine the first player. Alright, let's go. Ha! Hoo! Ha! Alright, then ha! Hoo! Ha!
So
that means that the Barony of Letnev is going to be first player. The first player gets the speaker marker. The first player takes the enormous stack of system tiles and shuffles them all up. Hope you got some big hands, my friend. In the 6-player game, you would actually remove 2 of these tiles at random and throw them back to the box. However, for the 3-player game, first remove 3 empty systems and an asteroid field. And then, after shuffling once more, 4 more systems are randomly removed. For a total of 8 gone. Whew, alright, well that makes the deck a little bit more manageable. So, starting with the first player, each player gets to actually place their homeworld adjacent to Mechalotol Rex. Next, each is placed out the space of 2 of these outward. Now the tiles are all dealt out to the players. And now, starting with the first player, we each place out a tile where we like. These tiles, however, are placed in a specific fashion first. We get to place our tiles where we like to, but we have to follow a certain pattern first. So in our game, we're going to have a ring around Mech Rex, and then we're going to have a secondary ring around the rest of the universe. So first off, this ring has to be completed first. So this would be the 6 places around Mech Rex. Then, a secondary ring is placed all around, so it's touching all of these places. Third, there are 2 locations placed directly beside your home planet. Home systems are connected as soon as it is appropriate, but this does not count as tile placement. Special systems may not be adjacent unless there is no other placement option available. When placing a system without planets, your next placement must be a system with planets, if at all possible. At the end of each round of placement, the order changes. so you can get a basic idea of how this was formed, if you didn't quite catch that through the fast forwarding. These 6 here that I've just marked were the first ring to be completed. And I'm not going to complete this whole ring here, but this secondary ring was the second ring to be completed. And then finally the placement beside our own homeworlds. It should be noted, in 4 more players, these sections of the ring would have been completed, so we would have had 3 entire rings. Each player now places his starting units in his home system as he wishes, and placing his starting technologies face up in front of him. This may take you a little bit if you are not too familiar with the game. Next, everybody plays their command counters on their race sheet as follows. 2 go into strategic allocation, 3 go into command pool, and 3 go into fleet supply. And now you are ready to play.
Okay, so now on to gameplay. So each round is split into 3 phases. The strategy phase, the action phase, and the status phase. And during each phase, players are actually going to take turns acting one after the other. So first of all, the strategy phase is actually pretty short. During this phase, starting with the speaker player and moving clockwise, each player may select any available strategy card from the table. So that's anything that's left, essentially. If there are any bonus tokens on the chosen card, then the player immediately gets to trade them in for that many trade goods or command counters as they wish. And after each player has a strategy card, any remaining cards gain 1 bonus token. So they become more and more attractive as the game goes on. In the 3-player game, it should be noted that each player actually gets to pick 2 cards in 2 separate rounds. Next up is the action phase, and this is where, well, all of the action happens. So starting with the player with the lowest numbered strategy card, each player in turn can take one of the following actions. Strategic actions, tactical actions, transfer actions, or they may pass. After all players have passed, then the phase is over. As far as the status phase goes, that's kind of just the cleanup phase. So there's a bunch of different stuff that happens, but it's usually pretty quick. So first of all players in player order may qualify for 1 public objective and or their secret objective if they qualify for that. The player must actually prove that they qualify. So if it says that you have to have certain things, you have to prove and show that you have those things. Each objective can be achieved by each player only once, and the objective is actually marked with one of the control markers of that player, just to show that they have achieved it. As soon as they achieve one of the objectives, their control marker on the victory point track is actually moved up that many points, and if a player reaches 10 victory points, they win immediately. So in this game, there aren't going to be any ties because, again, you qualify for these objectives in player order. So somebody is always going to get to 10 first. After that, all damaged ships are repaired. Command counters are actually removed from the board and given back to their players. Planet cards are refreshed by flipping them back to their face-up orientation. Each player gains 1 action card and 2 command counters. Players may redistribute their command counters. And the strategy cards are all returned to the table. So now I'll just go over how each of the actions work. Now, as noted, players take actions in the order determined by the strategy cards. So as you'll note, each strategy card has a very large number on it. And basically, the person with the lowest strategy card is going to be going first, then it's the person with the next lowest strategy card, and so on. So first of all, the strategic action. Now, a player is actually required to use his strategic action before he is allowed to pass. Now, these are the actions that are actually on the strategy cards. So each strategy card is required to be used before you can actually pass. That means in a 3-player game, as we're going to be playing here, both of the players' strategy cards must be used. So when the strategic action is taken, the active player first executes the primary action of their card. And that is actually denoted as primary ability. After that, each other player, clockwise from that player, may spend a strategy allocation command counter, that's from the strategy allocation area, to use the secondary ability. And this is usually pretty much the primary ability, but a little bit watered down. And finally, that card is flipped over to its inactive side to show that it has been used. It should be noted too that the initiative card, the number 1 card, actually does not have any ability. Its ability is essentially that you get to go first. Next up is the tactical action. Now this is pretty much the primary action you're going to be taking and the main way to interact with the board. So this is done in a number of steps and they have to be done in a specific order. That's all laid out in the rulebook, but I'll go over them briefly here. So first of all, the player must choose a hex on the board and they must place a command counter from their command pool on that hex. It should be noted that they cannot choose a hex that already has one of their command counters. Next, the player may move any number of his ships into that tile. I'm going to go over movement in a second, but it's important to note that you're moving only into that tile. It's not specifying where you're moving from. This is something that usually confuses new players. After movement, if any enemy has a PDS, a planetary defense system, within range, they can actually fire into that hex. Now, typically the range of a PDS is only the hex that it's on, so usually that's just going to be used to defend against invading forces. However, there are certain technologies that will actually extend that range. After enemy PDSs have fired, friendly PDSs who are within range can fire. In the event that the player has actually moved ships into a hex with enemy ships, a space battle now occurs, and we're going to go over combat later. Afterward, if the player still has forces in the hex, he can actually land ground forces on planets in that system, and this may possibly trigger invasion combat if that planet was already occupied by an enemy. And finally, the player may produce units within the hex, and again, we're going to do production a little bit later. Next up is the transfer action. Now, this is less commonly used, but essentially what it lets you do is it lets you actually more easily move things between 2 adjacent tiles. So first, both systems have to be activated. So you actually have to take 2 command counters from your command pool and place them on the adjacent hexes. Again, you can't choose a hex that has already been activated. So if you already have a command counter there, you can't choose that hex. Next, ships may move freely between those systems. So you can actually just, rearrange your ships however you want, move them between those 2 systems. After that, enemy PDS may fire into either system if they're within range. After that, we have planetary landings. Now, in this case, you can't actually invade a planet through a transfer action. You can only land additional forces on planets you already control. And finally, you can choose one of the 2 hexes activated for production. So now let's go over the movement rules. When moving a ship, it may move as many tiles as its movement characteristics. So each of the race sheets does list the movement for each type of ship. Some ships can move 2, some only 1. It really depends. Ships may not move through a hex containing enemy ships. So in this example, the barony could not move through here to this space. You have to stop immediately whenever you encounter enemy ships. And you can only stop where you have an activation token. So if that wasn't the tile that was activated, you can't move through there at all. War Suns and carriers actually have a capacity, so they're able to carry ground forces or PDSs during their move. And they can pick them up at any point during their movement. If a planet is actually left empty from this, then the player would take one of their control markers and place it on that planet just to show that they do still control the planet. It should also be noted that ships cannot leave a system containing their own command counter. So once a system is activated, essentially all of the ships there are kind of locked in until that command counter is removed. Next up we'll do combat, and this is kind of the crux of the game because even if you're playing peacefully, at some point you're going to have to attack someone or somebody's going to attack you just to complete an objective. It's going to happen. So again, this happens in a very specific sequence, and I'll go over this very briefly. Again, it's expanded on a lot in the rules, but this is a pretty good overview. So first of all, players may play any before battle effects, and that's going to be listed on the card that you can play before combat. Next, the attacker may withdraw, and if he does not choose to withdraw, then the defender may choose to retreat. It should be noted, though, that they're only declaring a withdrawal or retreat. It actually happens at the end of the round, so they're still going to have to survive one round of fire from the enemy. Next, for each ship in combat, the owning player rolls 1 die, 3 if it's a war sun, and each die that comes up with that specific ship's combat rating or higher scores a hit. So it's important to note, if you have 5 ships there, but they're different types, you can't just roll all 5 dice at once. You do have to roll them by type, just so that you know which combat rating counts for each die, essentially. Next, the attacker removes casualties, followed by the defender. So it's always the player who's taking the casualties who chooses which ships are destroyed, essentially. After that, if a withdrawal or retreat was declared at the start of the round, it happens now. And retreats or withdrawals must actually go to activated adjacent systems. So it has to be a system next to the one that you are currently fighting the battle in, and one that you have already activated. If there is no such system, you cannot retreat or withdraw. Essentially, this whole sequence is repeated until there is one winner, or until one of the players has withdrawn or retreated. Next up, we'll just go over invasion combat, so that's combat on planets. There are 3 types of planetary landings. So friendly planetary landings occur when you land additional units on your own planet. And that's pretty simple, you just land the units there, there's no special rules. If you're landing on a neutral planet, so that's a planet that nobody currently controls, then you can land your units there pretty much without any problems, and you also gain the planet card for that planet, although it's exhausted for this turn. And of course, hostile landings are when you're landing on a planet that one of the other players controls, and then invasion combat occurs. So this follows exactly the same sequence as a space battle. However, no retreats or withdrawals happen. As soon as you land on a planet, that's it. You're pretty much locked into that combat, and you have to fight it out until only one person's forces remain. And if the attacker is successful, then all planetary defense systems and space docks are actually removed immediately. So you don't gain control of those or anything. And control is gained, which means, of course, that you get the planet card from them. Next, I'd like to go over the special systems, so that's the ones with the red borders. So first of all, asteroid fields. You can only pass through this with an anti-mass deflector, that is a technology card. If you do not have that, you cannot go through here at all, and you can never end your activation in there, so this system can't be activated, you can only move through it. The nebula is actually kind of the polar opposite to the asteroid field, in that it can't be moved through, but it can be activated. In addition, defending ships actually gain +1 to combat rolls here, but ships leaving are at move 1 regardless of their actual movement. The Dread Supernova tile cannot be moved through, activated, or ever entered. That is essentially a dead tile. And finally, you're going to note that some of the tiles have these wormhole markers on them. With wormholes, basically the matching wormhole systems are considered adjacent. So this tile is considered adjacent to this tile, and this tile is considered adjacent to this tile. Next, I'm going to go over fleet supply and unit limits. So players are limited to the units available. So you have a certain number of each unit. For example, you have 2 war suns. That means you can only ever have 2 war suns. Players can, however, scuttle their own units at any time, which means that they destroy them. So they can just take them off the board, put them back in the reserves, and then they can build them elsewhere. Fighter and ground force tokens can actually replace the corresponding units as long as one actually remains. So in other words, for example, with Kenny's forces over here, he actually started with 4 fighters in this place, but he has replaced that with 3 fighter tokens, and he just has 1 of his fighter bits on top of that. So as long as you only have a number of stacks of fighters or ground forces equal to what you actually have, I believe it's 10 for each, you're good. In addition, each person is going to have a number of counters in their fleet supply. This denotes how many actual ships they can have in each hex. And it should be noted that fighters do not count towards this number. If at any point you exceed your fleet supply limit, then ships must be destroyed to bring it down in that hex. And you can never actually willingly exceed your limit, so you can't build additional ships in a place that already has the maximum, and you can't move ships into a place that already has the maximum. So next up is paying costs. So you're either going to pay for things in resources or in influence. Each planet is going to have a resource score, that's the one in the little green circle, and an influence score, that's the one in the sort of red cross. So when you're paying for things, first of all you have to announce the total cost. After that, you can flip any number of your planet cards, and each one contributes the indicated amount of resources or influence. It should also be noted that no change is ever given here. So if you're paying for something that costs 3, and you flip over a planet that has 4, then that's that. The extra one is just lost. Next, we're going to go over politics, and this is kind of one of the more interesting aspects of the game, because even though everyone's essentially at war with one another, they still have to vote in the Galactic Council for laws and stuff. So this usually happens through the primary ability of the political strategy card. And essentially, as soon as that action is taken, a political card must be resolved. So you would essentially draw the top political card, and you take care of voting right away. When voting, players have votes equal to the total influence showing on their unexhausted planets. So any face-up planet counts, and you don't actually have to spend the influence. That's a very important note. You just get those votes for free. Players vote starting to the speaker's left, meaning that the speaker is always going to be the last person to cast their vote. And a player must cast all of his votes, or none. He can't sort of split the vote. Ties are broken by the speaker. Now there are 3 types of votes. There are elect votes, in which case players cast their votes for a specific player, and the player with the most votes at the end wins that election. There are for or against votes, in which case each player votes either for or against, and whichever side wins, that's the action that's taken according to the political card. There are also laws. Now these work essentially the same as for or against votes, but as soon as they are voted in, they essentially become permanent. So that card is placed by the board, and that law is in effect for the remainder of the game unless they're removed. It should be noted, you should tread carefully with laws, because once they're voted in, they are actually pretty hard to get rid of. Next up is technologies. Now these are usually gained through the technology strategy card. Many of them have prerequisites, and the player must possess these to actually gain that technology. If you actually consult the back of the rulebook, there actually is a technology tree. It's rather complicated, but it does give you a good idea if you're trying to get a specific technology, what you actually have to go through to get it. In addition, some of the planets actually have one of the technology icons on them. If you possess one of these planets and its card is unexhausted, then you actually get a discount of 1 for buying that type of technology. And this does stack up, so if you have 2 planets with that icon, you get a discount of 2, if you have 3, you get 3, etc. Next up is trade. Players may enter into trade agreements through the trade strategy. Each player involved in an agreement gets one of their trade partner's trade cards, and it's up to the trade partner which one they get. In some cases, a lot of the races actually have different values on each of their trade cards. So, you might get a 1, you might get a 2, you don't know. Players may only have one trade agreement per opponent, so you can't, give both of your trade cards to an opponent. They have to be given to different players. And a trade agreement can actually be broken by either party during the status phase. Any type of battle between the two parties immediately breaks the agreement. Now, as noted before during setup, there are these trade good tokens. You're going to gain these in various ways throughout the game, usually through trade agreements. There are a few other ways, though. And these are essentially used in lieu of paying one resource or influence. So you can use these to sort of help you pay costs. Trade goods are limited to the number of tokens in the game, though, so if they're all gone, well, you can't get any more. And trade goods can actually be freely traded between players at any time, so this sort of is kind of an economy. And, you can actually promise people things if they give you trade goods or the like, although, of course, no agreement is actually binding in this game. So next up, I'm just going to go over all of the various units and any special rules that are associated with them. So first of all, we'll go with the space stock. Space stocks are very special in that they can actually produce additional units. Now, space stocks can only be built if the system that they are being built in is currently activated, if the planet they're being built on was controlled for the entire round, so you can't take over a planet and then build a space stock there. The planet cannot already have a space dock, one space dock per planet, and the system cannot have enemy ships. So in a hex with a space dock, at the very end of the transfer or tactical actions, you can build units there equal to the planet's resources plus 2. So for example, if you build a space dock on a planet that has 2 resources, you can build 4 units there. Any spaceships built are placed in space, and ground forces or PDS units are placed on the planet that the space dock is on. You can't place it on another planet in that system. A space dock can also support 3 fighters, and I'll go over support in a little bit here. And if enemy units are in the hex, then that space dock is considered blockaded and it cannot produce space units. Alright, so ground force units can never be in space. They can only either be on a planet or on a carrier or war sun if they're being transported. And these are the only unit that can take control of planets. You can't take over a planet with a PDS, unfortunately. That's pretty much all there is to say about those. Carriers, the sort of freighter-y looking ships, they have a capacity of 6. So these can be ground forces or PDSs being transported, or they can be fighters, and again I'll go over fighter support in a little bit. Excess units, should there be any, are immediately destroyed. If a carrier is destroyed, then all carried units are immediately destroyed as well. And any ground force or PDS units that are on board are inoperational. They can't fight in space battles for obvious reasons. These can also pick up units at any point during movement, except when the units are in a hex with enemy ships, or when the units are in a hex that was previously activated. Planetary defense systems, or PDSs, essentially protect against dreadnought bombardments, and they can be used to fire at enemy ships. I'll go over dreadnought bombardments in a few minutes here. They can attack enemy ships within range, so again, the normal range for PDS is its own hex, although it can actually hit adjacent hexes with the Deep Space Cannon technology card. It may fire at invading forces at the start of an invasion combat. Opponents cannot return fire, so anything destroyed by a PDS is removed immediately. And PDSs, again, can never be in space. Fighter units, which are the, little spaceships, these are not capable of moving between hexes. They can only be moved when on a carrier, essentially. They are always in space, and they must always be supported by a space dock, carrier, or war sun. So again, each space dock can support up to 3 within that hex, and each carrier or war sun can support up to 6. This is ignored during battle, though. So if a carrier or war sun is taken out during battle, the fighters aren't immediately destroyed. They can keep on fighting until the end of the battle. However, after the battle, if there isn't enough support for the fighters, then any excess are destroyed. Cruisers are nice and simple. They don't have any special rules. They just fight things. Destroyers, which are these little guys, are actually very effective against fighters. So they can actually fire an anti-fighter barrage at the start of space battle, in which case each of them rolls 2 dice, and for each hit, which is a 9+, the opponent loses a fighter. This is immediate, so the fighters do not get to fight back. Dreadnoughts, the largest basic unit in the game, are pretty impressive. For one thing, they take 2 hits to destroy. After the first hit, they're actually just turned on their side to denote that they're damaged. And if they are still damaged at the end of the turn during the status phase, they are actually repaired. They can also conduct planetary bombardments. So at the start of invasion, you can actually roll 1 die for each, and a hit destroys a ground force on the planet. Now this is blocked if there is a PDS on the planet, and it should be noted that they can only bombard 1 planet per activation. So if you're attacking both planets within a 2-planet system, then you can actually only choose to bombard one planet with each dreadnought. War suns are pretty much the pinnacle of the units here. They can only actually be built if you have researched the war sun technology, and they're pretty potent. For one thing, again, they take two hits to destroy, so after 1 hit they're kind of just knocked over, and they're repaired at the end of the turn. They can do a planetary bombardment, just like a dreadnought. However, they can actually ignore PDSs, so they can still fire on planets with planetary defense systems, and they can bombard outside of combat. So even if you're not attacking a planet, as long as you've activated that system, you can actually still fire on the ground forces with a war sun. In addition, they roll 3 dice during combat instead of the standard 1. And they have a capacity of 6 for carrying, ground forces, PDSs, or fighters. Alright, so now we're going to get into the example turn. And I say turn because we're probably only going to get 1 here. This is a pretty epic-sized game, and I seriously doubt we'll have time for more than 1. We'll see, though.
For realsies this time, not like with Mansions of Madness, where we said we were only going to do 1 turn, then we did like 20. Like, this is for realsies. We're probably only going to get 1 turn. Like Democker. Oh god, like Democker.
Alright, so first of all, we're going to start off with the strategy phase. So, in this case, the speaker is going to start, which is right now the Barony of Letnev.
Well, I think my choice is fairly obvious. The Barony is going to take Imperial.
Alright, so next up is the Universities of Jolnar.
I can just take it for you.
I think I'm going to go with the initiative card.
Alright.
Thank you. In addition to getting the initiative card, the special ability of the initiative card says that as soon as I claim this initiative card, I get the speaker token. So I'll take that, please.
I see how it is. Alright, and the Naluv Collective is going to go with Political. As an interesting note, even though Jason took the initiative token, the Naluv Collective's special ability reduces the initiative value of their card to 0, regardless of which one they take. And this means that they are always first in the play order.
So because we are playing a 3-player game, we are actually going to do another round of selections of strategy cards, so we'll each have 2. But again, this is only for the 3-player game. Any more players and you only get 1.
Letney is going to take Trade.
Alright, the Universities of Jolnar choose to take Logistics.
And Nalu is going to take Technology.
Alright, Alright, so now at the end of the strategy phase, we place one bonus token on each of the strategy cards that have not been picked. So in this case, Diplomacy and Warfare, so that those will become a little bit more attractive the next time. And now we move on to the action phase. Alright, so for the action phase, we are going to be going in the order of our cards. Now, because we each have 2 cards, it's going to go with, we're going to go with the lowest ranked one. So, first of all, the Nalu are going to be going first because their cards are always 0. After that, I'm going to be going with the Universities of Jolnar because they have 1. And finally, we're going to have the Barony of Letnev because they have 5. So, starting off with the Nalu.
So I'm choosing to take a tactical action for my first action. I'm going to activate this system by taking a point from my command pool. Then I get to move into that system. So the carrier is going over into this system, and with that, they're bringing all of my fighters and 2 of my ground troops. So, since the carrier has a total capacity of 6, I've brought over all 6 of the things I'm allotted. There's no PDSD, or PDS rather. There's no space battles. Then we go to planetary landings. So, since this is a neutral landing, I get to place my ground troops right on there. And everything else that's in space is just going to hang out in space for a little while. I'm going to go through the planet cards and pick out my new Lodor. And I'm going to add it to my resources. It's played face down in my inventory to note that it's exhausted. Then, of course, there's the invasion step, which, again, we ignore this round, and production. And production is ignored, of course, because I don't have a space dock there, and I just took over that planet, so.
Alright, so next the Universities of Jolnar get to take one of their actions. So the very first thing they are going to do is they're going to actually do a strategic action. I'm going to take the logistics action. So first of all, I execute the primary ability. And the primary ability, which is called Comprehensive Operations, essentially lets me just take 4 of my command counters from my reinforcements and place them on my sheet. So I'm going to add 2 to my strategy allocation, I think, and 1 each to my fleet supply and my command pool. So next, each person in clockwise order from me gets to execute the secondary ability if they wish.
So, in order to do this, the Nalu would have to expend both their planets, which means that they wouldn't be able to produce this turn, and that's just simply not worth it for 1 more token. Alternatively, the Barony don't have enough to do that anyway, so they both pass.
Alright, in that case, the logistics card is actually now turned over to its inactive side. So that's my action, and I should note that both of my cards are effectively now inactive, so I can pass at any point at this conjecture. So next up is the Barony of Letnev.
The Barony is going to take the Imperial action. So draw the top card from the objective deck and place it in the common play area. Stage 1 objective, I have 5 technology advances. 1 victory point. And then the continuing on with that, I get 2 victory points. Then we go to the secondary ability. So I'm going to pass this around, so...
Alright, so I am actually going to choose to take the secondary ability. So I'm going to spend 1 command counter from my strategy allocation area. And it allows me to build units in any one of my systems. So I'm obviously going to choose my home system. So now I have my space dock on Nar, which has 2 resources, meaning I can build up to 4 units. So I am going to choose to build 4 fighters here. So 4 fighters. Fighters actually cost 1 for 2 of them. So that means the total cost is going to be 2. So I am going to actually exhaust Nar, which has a resource value of 2, to cover that cost. So I am simply going to get 4 of the fighter tokens and place them under my 1 fighter, which is currently in that system. And that's pretty much it for me here. So now the Nalu have the option of doing that.
So I'm going to build in Drua, And I'm going to build some fighters and ground forces. So because I have the envirocompensator, I can actually the Drua's limit is now 6 instead of 5 would have been. So I'm going to build 2 fighters and 4 more ground troops. So this is going to give me a grand total of 5 ground troops in total at this location and 2 space fighters in orbit. Imperial is then brought back to the barony and flipped back over. So Nalu's action now is going to be use a technology strategy card. So it says receive 1 technology advance for which I have the necessary prerequisites. So I'm going to build stasis capsules. This allows my dreadnoughts and cruisers to carry 1 ground force unit, where normally they could not. Alright, so the secondary function is now activated. So first it goes to the barony. Well, the barony doesn't have any actual way of doing this because they don't have anywhere near that amount of resources. So next goes to Jason, which I assume is going to be the same.
Well, typically, again, you need to spend 8 resources, and there's no way that we can afford that right now.
Of course.
However, the Universities of Jolnar actually have a special ability that says, when executing the secondary ability of the technology strategy, you may execute both the primary and the secondary ability.
Oh my goodness.
So, I actually get to spend a command counter for my strategy allocation, and I can also just take a technology that I have the prerequisites for free.
Oh wow, okay.
So in this case, I'm going to choose Cybernetics, which gives all of my fighters a +1 on their combat rolls. In addition, again, I could do the secondary ability as well, but there's no way that I can come up with 8 resources right now. So that's pretty much that.
Okay, and that's brought back to the collective and brought back inactive.
Alright, so it's now my turn again. In this case, I'm going to choose to take a tactical action. So I'm going to activate this system here. And then I'm going to move some stuff in there. So I am moving the carrier there with 2 ground forces and 4 of my fighters. I think I'm going to reserve the rest of my units for now. So I'm going to end the movement bit there. There are no PDSs that can fire. There's no space battle. I am going to do planetary landings, so I'm going to land on both of these planets here with 1 ground force each. And because this is a neutral landing, I immediately get the planet cards for those, although, again, they come into play exhausted, so I'm not going to get to use them just yet. Again, there is no invasion combat, because there are no defending forces, and I don't have a space dock there, so I cannot produce. So that is the end of my action, and we move on to the barony.
Alright, the barony is going to take the trade action. So I can choose either A or B. With A, I can immediately receive 3 trade goods, and then receive trade goods from all my open trade agreements, which there are none. So, I'm going to take my 3 trade goods. Secondly, I can open trade negotiations among all players. So
at this conjuncture, I would like to announce that the Universities of Jolnar are entirely open to trade negotiations with the Barony of Letnev.
As are the Nalu Collective. Well, what do you have to offer me here?
I can give you a 3 trade goods trade agreement.
I can't offer anything back nearly that good, but I can offer something.
Well, what would your something be?
1.
Well, I suppose it's better than nothing.
Yeah, the barony is okay with this agreement.
Alright, so we exchange trade agreement cards, and these now go face up in our areas.
The Nalu Collective says, what about me? I want some too.
Iken has trades.
And the barony says, well, I don't know, what can you offer me? And the Nalu says, I'll give you a 2. And the barony's like, yeah, hell yeah. Here, have another crappy 1. Then the secondary effect of trade happens. So, going clockwise.
Alright, so, well, I do still have a fair bit of trade allocation at this point, or strategy allocation. So I might as well use one, and I will get 1 trade good for that from my trade agreement I just created.
So I am going to spend the strategy point to receive a trade's goods. This is the return. Back to the barony. Inactive. Alright, then it goes back to the Nalu. Okay, so I guess I'm going to activate political.
Alright.
I get to draw 3 action cards. So I draw my 3 cards. And I receive 1 command counter from my reinforcements. Then draw the top of the political deck and resolve his agenda. Cost overruns. I don't care how you do it, just get the budget under control. 4. Each player must discard 1 trade good from his trade goods area for each planet he controls. Against, discard this card. Okay, so the current speaker is here then. So I guess it starts to the left with the Nalu.
Yep.
The Nalu is for this.
Alright, so that's 2 votes for.
The Barony is against this.
So that is 2 votes for, 1 vote against.
Universities?
So the universities, being the speaker here, and with 2 votes, is essentially the deciding vote here.
Mm-hmm.
In this case, although I only have a meager 1 trade good, I would prefer to keep it, so I'm going to vote against.
Alright.
So that gives a total of 4 against, so this card is simply discarded.
3 against.
Oh yeah, sorry, 3 against.
It's all good. Regardless, it's still more than enough to defeat. Right. After completing the agenda, draw up the top 3 cards of the political deck, secretly read them, and place 1 face up, the rest face down in the bottom. Okay, I've chosen my agenda. And then this is passed clockwise. So, the Barony, spend 1 command counter from your strategic allocation to draw 1 action card. Yes. I will do that. Because why not? There you go.
And the universities will also gain 1 action card.
Alright, this is Return of the Nalu, inactive. Next up, universities.
Well, at this point, there's not really a whole lot else I can do with what I have, so I think I'm just going to prepare a little bit for the next round. So I am going to take a tactical action. I'm going to activate this system, and I'm simply going to build 2 ground forces using my 1 remaining resource. And they simply go on the planet with the space dock.
Okay, then it's to the Barony. So, the Barony is going to move into this system here, or is going to activate the system, not surprisingly to move. So, skipping through the steps, la la la, freighter, ground troop, all that good stuff. Okay, and that's basically it. Actually, I'll take 2 ground forces along with me. And then I will search for both of these cards. And I guess that's it for the Barony. Nalu is going to place a movement token here. So, skipping down all the steps is just going to be movement into the system. Since their stasis capsules allow their cruisers and dreadnoughts to actually carry a ground force. So this cruiser is going to move over into this section here with a lowly ground force. And I'll bring the destroyer with me as well, because why not? Okay, and that's it for that. So that's it for the Nalu, so I guess we'll go to the universities. Jolnar.
The universities of Jolnar at this point choose to pass.
Alright.
So this means that I cannot take any further actions, although technically I could still take secondary actions of strategy cards if there were actually still any that were active.
Alright. The Barony is going to produce at home. So commanding home to produce with Arc Prime. I have 4 resources, and I'm going to choose to spend 5 to make another Dreadnought. I'm going to spend the other 2 goods I have there, making ground troops for a total of 4 ground troops at home. So that's all my goods, and my last planet exhausted. Okay, so that's it for the Barony. Goes back to the Nalu. The Nalu are going to place an action card. Place 2 free PDS units on any planet you control that does not have a PDS unit. So I'm going to place 1 on Malok and 1 on Lodor. Because I have them and they don't have things. So we skip the universities of Jolnar because they have passed and there's nothing left for them to really do anyway. And we have the Barony. The Barony doesn't really have anything left to do, so they're also going to pass. And back up to the Nalu. I guess the Nalu are also going to pass.
Alright, so since everyone has passed at this point, that brings us to the end of the action phase. So now we're going to go into the status phase. So, first of all, going in turn order, we can claim objective cards. So that is going to start with the Na'alu.
I reveal nothing because I have not come anywhere close to revealing my objective.
Okay. And obviously you don't qualify for the one public objective that is out.
No, nowhere close.
Yeah. So next up is the Universities of Jolnar. And at this point, they are actually going to qualify for the public objective card.
Dun dun dun!
Which says, I have 5 technology advances, because we started with 4 and gained 1 along the way. So I get to place a control marker on that to denote that I have claimed that objective, and I gain 1 victory point.
And last, the barony doesn't have anything to do objectives with either, so they're going to pass during that step.
Alright, so we move on through the status phase. So first of all, there are no damaged ships, so we skip that. Next, we remove command counters from the board. So any command counters on hexes are simply removed to our reinforcement area. Next, we refresh our planet cards. So all of our planet cards that were exhausted are now flipped to the unexhausted side, meaning that they are available for the next turn. Next up, we receive 1 action card each. So we can just each draw one of those. And we also gain 2 command counters from our reinforcements. And immediately after that, we can actually redistribute our command counters as we wish. So we can basically add 2 and then just rejigger them as we like. Finally, we return all of the strategy cards to the common area, face up. And now we would begin another turn.
Alright, so, Jason, Twilight Imperium, talk.
Well, first of all, this is one of my favorite games. I do really like these massive games, the so-called Ameritrash, but I really like the epic scale warfare and everything. And I really like this game in that it incorporates so many different elements, because there's not just the space combat, but there's also technology, there's politics, so you actually have to deal with everyone that you're trying to kill. There's trade agreements. There's a lot of stuff in there, right?
Yeah, I really like the way that the game isn't just like move around the board and kill your opponents. Although sometimes you do kind of get sheltered into that.
For sure.
There's some races that excel at that.
Mm-hmm.
But if you really want to, you can really play this game as a pacifist. I mean, again, some races are much better at that than others, and you should kind of go with what your strengths are. But no, I really like the fact that you're not just forced into just killing everyone.
Well, yeah, that's always good because while that type of game certainly has a place, ultimately this is so much more just because of that. Another really cool thing about this is they actually include kind of 2 sort of mini expansions. They're essentially tokens that are used with optional rules. So first of all, there's the Leaders expansion, which gives each race a number of leaders that they can use to do various things. And there's the Distant Suns expansion, which actually makes you place random exploration tokens on each planet. So, you might go there and you might get extra stuff. You might find a deadly disease that kills everyone. It adds sort of an element of exploration to the game, which is kind of neat too.
Yeah. It is like overall I have to say this is a pretty spectacular game. The biggest issue though, and this is something that everyone is going to say anytime you ever bring up Twilight Imperium, it's so long and it's so hard to get people to play this game. Because it is a very gigantic game. I mean, one of the reasons why we wanted to do this review of it, like so many other times when we've done big games like this, is so that someone who wants to get their group into this can say, hey, look, watch this video, and hopefully this will be able to show you how to play. It'll show you how a turn goes. It'll show you what mechanics are, and hopefully you'll pick something up from it. And I really thought this video was going to be longer, but it actually is surprisingly shorter than I thought it was going to be, which is saying a lot. But
well, I mean, it definitely is an epic scale, and that is kind of a barrier, unfortunately. But I really don't think this game is as complex as it's made out to be.
Yeah, it's true.
And I think if a lot of people would just give it a chance, surely the casual gamer who likes things like Settlers of Catan, and just that kind of stuff, they might not want to play this. But anybody who's even willing to try out something that's a little bit heavier, I think it's a good option.
I would have to agree with you for sure on this. I have a few minor issues with this game. Length aside, I mean I really feel that's effectively it's an issue. It's clearly an issue. but it's a non-issue comparatively because the game is designed to be a long game. It's not intended to be like, hey, let's bang out a couple of these every single night. One of the issues I have is the way in which just the pieces are distributed. Now, we had a little conversation about this when we were putting it away earlier. Yeah. So the game goes so far as to give different colored components, or 6 sets of colored components. And it also goes so far as to give every single race their own individual set of components. But what I don't understand is I get the fact that they wanted to have, each race has, their cool-looking tokens with their race's emblem, and that's all fine and dandy. But why not just include colored components, like these cardboard components, for the colors that you're playing? So if you're playing the green pieces, regardless of your race, you get the other green pieces that go with that. They have the technologies like this too. Every other bit of card that they have with them, with the exception of maybe the trade cards. The trade cards could be specific to.
Well, that makes more sense because the different races would have more, tradability. I suppose.
More or less to give, which that's totally fine. Keep the special races cards, but this way they could have focused on perhaps having even more special races. 10 is a lot. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying this game is lacking in special races. 10 is enough, but they could have. Expand more. Sure. And then they wouldn't be limited by components. They wouldn't have to, every time they put out a new race, put out a whole giant slew of more components. If they wanted to include more players in later games, and quite frankly that is terrifying to me, the fact that they could even consider that. I'm not sure if that's something that they have done.
I can't remember whether that's included in the expansions.
And stuff.
I think it still caps at 6, but I'm not positive about that.
Well, regardless, if they did decide to put out more, they wouldn't have to put out more cardboard bits too. They'd just be like, here's a sheet. This is your race. Go. And here's 2 little trade cards. It would be nothing to add more things into the pit there. And in theory, they could release 10 more races and have them share planets with all the other races or something. Then you have the option of picking the 2. Oh, that was another thing that always kind of bugged me with this, although I understand it. The randomization of alien races at the beginning.
Well, that is kind of thing that you can fix with your own house rules.
That's true.
I know that one thing that we have done in the past with this game that I've done a couple of times is either let people draw 2 or 3 different home planets and pick one, or something like that, or just even pick whichever one you want to play.
Right.
So the base rules do say that it has to be random, but you can change that.
And I do understand the need for randomness, because let's say a person knows exactly what race they need to play that is the perfect strategy that fits with them perfectly. On one hand, that's good, because that allows them to, play the game they want to play it. On the other hand, they will punk every noob that comes anywhere near the table, and it's not fun anymore. So, the randomization thing is kind of necessary in that way. But, like you said, it's just as easy just to hand out a couple tiles to everybody and, let them all pick their own. Maybe you could even have it as a handicap sort of thing. Really experienced players have to take the race that they're handed. Yeah. Less experienced players get to pick from 2 or 3 even, if you want to try to make sure that they get something that they think is cool. Mm-hmm. There's just sort of little things really at best.
Yeah, but no, it's definitely something that you could alter to really fit with your own group.
Yeah. And that's a minor quibble, I think, overall, because it's easily fixed. We suggested the ways to fix it. I'm sure there's 100 other ways you could think of.
Yeah.
All right, so we should get to the ratings. So, Jason, what do you say?
I'm actually giving this a 5 out of 5.
Ooh, okay.
Yeah, I know. Well, like I said, it's one of my favorite games.
Mm-hmm.
It is really something I wish I could play a lot more. I do recognize that there is the getting new players in and the length issue, and I have rated other games down for that. But at the same time, for this game, personally, I believe that the actual quality of the game overrides that. Mm. So I am gonna stick with my 5.
That's a really solid drop on that. Again, I always rib on this game. Anytime Twilight Imperium is mentioned, I'm always like, oh, Twilight Imperium, oh my god, I'm gonna play that forever. But it is a good game. I really do like this game, and I agree. I really wish we got to play this more. And that's exactly the reason why I can't give it a 5, is because, quite frankly, it's almost impossible to get this game going half the time. We tried for almost a couple months now to get one game of this on, didn't we?
Well, yeah.
With our group. And, just through, scheduling conflicts and stuff like that. But you also have people that see the name Twilight Imperium and they're like, whoa, buddy, no, you, call me when you're done playing that, I'll play whatever else you want, just leave me out of that.
Yeah.
And unfortunately has all this baggage with it, which I guess is kind of like a meta thing where people have placed the baggage on it rather than the baggage it really has, per se. At any rate, though, it's a very enormous game, and this tends to scare off a lot of people. And I think that it is a fantastic game, and I still think a 4 out of 5 is a very reasonable mark for this. I mean, that's still a pretty spectacular game.
Absolutely.
I mean, that's, yeah. So, yeah, I'm going to stick with a 4 out of 5, I'd say. Alright, and that's going to give us a grand total of 9 out of 10 meeples, which, again, is a very awesome game.
Absolutely.
Definitely deserve that.
Mm-hmm. Alright, so that's it for this time. So join us next time for, Ken, what are we doing? It's your choice, I believe.
My choice, eh?
I don't like this look you're giving me.
I think we should play Clue.
What?
Yeah, Clue. Oh, Clue totally needs a tutorial. No one here actually has any idea how to play
That is
so.
barely a board game.
No, what are you talking about? It's like the board game. Do you understand how much history Clue has? That is an intense board. You know, we're going to need
I will kill you.
We are going to need a
I will
specialist
kill you.
for this. Without a specialist, there's no way we could actually do this review. So, there we go.
Alright, join us next time for Clue.
See you next time, and have good games.